We're beginning the Wheel of Pythagoras section of The Phoenix by Manly P. Hall. Of interest to students of numerology is this ancient fragment which, descending from the dim and uncertain past, which revived by the necromancers of the Dark Ages, according to Charles Singer in his recent publication, From Magic to Science, a manuscript of the 9th century, probably the earliest medical text by an English hand, describes the method of determining by this Pythagorean sphere whether a sick person will recover. The same author continues, the sphere of Pythagoras is a recognized medical device. It is possibly of Egyptian origin, but it certainly spread to Europe through Greek intermediaries. It is translated from Greek and is known in that language from a 3rd century papyrus laid in 5, and in Latin from a large number of early manuscripts from the 8th century onward. During the Dark and Middle Ages, this diagram is common in the English manuscripts, where it is variously attributed to Hippocrates, Democritus, Apelles, Apollonius, Pythagoras, Columcille, Bede, Petrosus, Nicepso, and Plato. Quite a number of specimens date from Anglo-Saxon times. Pythagoras is known to have practiced divination and to have instructed his disciples in the development of such arts. Iamblichus declares that on the grounds that premonitions are conveyed to men by daemons and heroes, Pythagoras honored divination as not the least of the sciences by which men could interpret the benevolence of the gods. He qualified his statement, however, by declaring that only the godly and those properly qualified through a realization of the mysteries of nature could successfully practice the art. To the rest it was folly, for the immortals would only consume with those of upright spirit and worthy motive. Iamblichus further declared that the list of wonders and miracles attributed to or performed by Pythagoras exceeded 10,000, not a few being associated with his foreknowledge of events, either to persons or in nature. Plutarch also mentions the extraordinary ability of the sage of Samos to interpret omens, affirming that Pythagoras approved of all forms of auguries, except such as involved the sacrifice of living creatures. For this reason, he renounced extipacy, the entrails of sacred animals, and ichthyomancy, the entrails of sacrificed fishes, which methods were widely practiced in his day. Porphyry relates that the philosopher practiced divination by frankincense and smoke, determining the nature of approaching events by the destiny of the fumes and direction in which they were carried by the wind. According to Cicero, Pythagoras foretold events from the flights of the birds and from the voices of the gods, as heard in the sounds of nature. Diogenes Laertius also records that he predicted by Platonism, i.e. by the euphony of words, and observing that accidental speeches of those about him. He maintained that harmonies and inharmonies of speech were produced by the governors of the world, that circumstances affecting nature were reflected into the unguarded utterances of men. It is known that Pythagoras interpreted dreams, an art which, according to Porphyry, he learned while studying with ancient Hebrew sages. He was also able, through hypnotic or mesmeric powers, to cause artificial sleep in others, which sleep he caused to be filled with dreams, the latter being interpreted the same as the oracle of Trophonius. Pythagoras also communed with the shades of the departed, but did not overestimate the value of such information. A disciple once came to the master, declaring that in a dream he has talked with his departed father. When asked regarding the importance of such conversation, Pythagoras answered that it portioned nothing and was of no greater interest than conversation with a living man, in that death caused no change in the degree of the intellect. Upon the authority of Apelles, we are assured that the Samian was well versed in judicial astrology, having learned the science of the stars from the Chaldeans, who had informed him as to the number of the planets, their stations, revolutions, and effects upon the natives of men in the world. For this reason it has sometimes been claimed that the original Wheel of Pythagoras was a horoscope. A close examination reveals that this could not have been the case, inasmuch as the wheel was primarily concerned with numbers and letters, and not with planets and signs. Give you a snapshot of what these wheels look like. Pretty intricate. Of course, something by Pythagoras. It is quite possible, however, that the wheels or spheres by which the sage explained all mysteries was, in reality, but a symbolic name for the world itself, which contained within all questions as well as their answers. St. Augustine, upon the authority of Varro, notes that Pythagoras was skilled in hydromancy, which he had learned from the Magi of Persia. The latter method is thus described by Paracelsus, who attributed it to the Assyrians. They take a basin full of water convenient for the daemons, gods, to glide into the bottom. The basin seems to make a noise as if it breathed. The water in the basin in substance differs in no way from the other water, but through the virtue infused thereinto by charms, is much more excellent and made more ready to receive a prophetic spirit. This is a particular daemon, terrestrially attracted by compositions. As soon as he glides into the water, he makes a little sound, inarticulate, which denotes his presence. Afterwards, the water becoming agitated runs over, and there are certain whispers heard with predictions of the future. The kind of spirit is very wandering, because it is of the solar order, and such daemons purposely speak with a low voice. Although from the foregoing sufficient evidence might be adduced to affirm that Pythagoras was addicted to divination in its several forms, there is no direct connection between him and the wheels circulated under his name during the Middle Ages. Even if Pythagoras actually employed such device, it has certainly come down to us in a badly mutilated and imperfect state. Yet, if any element of truth exists in the principles involved, it should be possible to reconstruct, through study and application, the original principle. It should be noted that this Pythagorean sphere is not reproduced herewith as a genuine fragment, but as a medieval curiosity. While there is no absolute proof that the device is genuine, there is, conversely, no absolute proof that it is not. We know that magical devices were employed by the Egyptians and even earlier races, and that Pythagoras was deeply versed in the occultic sciences of nearly all ancient nations. As he himself affirmed, however, it is not sufficient to memorize their methods or answers. Prophecy is a divine gift bestowed upon only those who have a prophetic spirit. This gift is the reward of concentration to principle and truth. The great seer, then, must in all other respects be equally enlightened, for the ability to predict particulars must arise from a profound knowledge of generals. Let us now turn to a heavy and curious old volume, profusely illustrated with strangely conceived and intricately executed symbolic figures in copper. This book, dog-eared almost beyond redemption, passes under the modest title of Uturiuquisque Cosmi Maioris Cycliciet et minors meta physia technia historia in duo volumina secundum cosmi differentiam divisa. The author, what a fucking title, Jesus Christ. The author was Robert Flood, whose name is now identified with most of the Rosicrucian and Freemasonic activities of the early 17th century. After passing over several hundred pages devoted to obscure opinions upon the origin of the spheres, the establishment of the arts and sciences, armaments, mechanical devices, etc., we find wedged in between abstruse mathematical theorems and an essay on pipe organs an extraordinary account of the Wheel of the Sages, which, as one enthusiastic old writer has declared, was the approved and affirmed by the science and reason of Pythagoras himself. As prefatory to his description of the Pythagorean wheel, Flood reproduces from older authors a number of opinions current in his day upon the subject of the Pythagorean arithmetic, and, owing to the rarity of such information, we are reproducing herein the salient features of his treatise. We can discover no direct connection or similarity between the systems set forth by Flood and those of the classical philosopher from which the information is presumably derived. This does not necessarily detract from its value, however, as it is reasonably certain that the Greek initiates possessed a learning concealed from the profane which never found its way into their published writings. As a Rosicrucian and a man of exceptional learning, Flood may have had access to records and documents not available to the uninitiated. It is hardly to be presumed that he would have included the chapters on philosophical mathematics if he did not consider the subject in some way relevant to his Rosicrucian interpretation of the mysteries of nature. In the section De Numero et Numerantium, I have no idea, I don't even know why I'm trying. He sets forth what are presumably the Pythagorean numerical correspondences to the letters of the alphabet, the 7 planets, the days of the week, the signs of the zodiac. If this table to be authentic, it is obviously the most valuable numerological fragment extant. In Flood's system, the numerical correspondences to the letters of the alphabet differ according to the purposes for which they are employed. This is probably due to the fact that the Rosicrucian drew his information from several ancient sources, each method being consistent with itself, but not necessarily with the rest. The first problem described by Flood is to discover the ruling planet by a computation of the numerical value of the Christian or first name. The method is to add together the numbers corresponding to the letters of the personal name in its most complete spelling. This sum is divided by 7. And the remainder is the number of the planet, which will be found in the foregoing table. If there is no remainder, then the number is 7. The numerical value of the letter letters, however, must be determined from the following alphabet, designed primarily for this purpose and differing radically from the first noted. The letter K is missing from the table, but there is no way of ascertaining whether this is an intentional or accidental. Okay. The second problem involves the discovery of the ruling zodiacal sign from the numerical value of the letters of the given name. The numerical value of the name is found by the same method as in the first problem, but the sum in this instance is divided by 30. The remainder signifying the zodiacal sign according to Flood's first table, thus 1 as a remainder signifies Aries, 18 Libra, 30 Pisces, etc. When there is no remainder from the division, 30 is the significant number. The special alphabet used in this calculation follows. I guess I'll just show you the table. The third problem is to determine which of the two contending persons will be victorious over the other. The given names of both constants should be reduced to their numerical values according to Flood's first table, and the name which represents the larger sum will be victorious. Imminent happenings can be predicted by ascertaining from this same table the numerical equivalent of the first name of the party involved, dividing it by 7, and referring the remainder of the planets as previously described. The circumstances will be of the nature of the planet, as indicated by astrological keywords. From these curious calculations, of which Flood publishes a considerable number, we turn to his discussion of the Pythagorean wheel or globe. In introducing the subject, Flood writes, Apollonius illustrates a way of divining by the use of the Pythagorean doctrine, saying that future things can be determined by the use of a certain kind of globe invented by Pythagoras, which seems to solve an infinite number of problems, such as life, death, the whereabouts of fugitives, litigations, victories, etc., on the composition of this wheel and the true positions of the number upon it. The older authors have written so variously that the correct composition cannot be surely known, but only conjectured. I have inspected the spheres composed by these authors, and, following those that agree most closely, have drawn the accompanying figures in conformity with the original wording and design according to their own doctrine. The first wheel, that of Pythagoras, contains in the second circle the letters of the alphabet, in the third their numerical values, in the fourth the planets, in the fifth several numbers unexplained. The interior of the wheel is divided into an upper and lower half by a horizontal line. The numbers contained above this line are propitious and affirmative, while those below are unfortunate and negative. In other words, if after you have arrived at the significant sum, the same number appears in the upper half of the intersection of the wheel, the question will be answered yes, if in the lower half of the wheel, by no. It follows that all questions must be so formulated as to be susceptible of either the affirmative or negative answer. In some manuscripts the numbers are written on scrolls, and in one instance are in a diamond-shaped arrangement accompanied by the figures of life and death. The letter J does not occur, and I should be substituted for it. The letter V must also be substituted for U. Two methods of interrogating the oracle have come down to us from antiquity. We shall reproduce herewith only the method given by Flood, inasmuch as it is more scientific of the two procedures. First, ascertain the numerical value of the Christian name of the person with whom the question is concerned. Referring to the Wheel of Pythagoras, substitute for the letters given in the second ring their numerical value as shown in the third ring, and add these together. Then find from the first table of Pythagorean numerical correspondences the number corresponding to the day of the week upon which the incident under discussion will take place. Also find from an almanac the numbers of the days of the moon's age for the particular day under consideration. Add the sum of the letters of the given name to the numerical equivalents of the day of the week and the age of the moon, dividing their sum by 30. The fractional remainder then becomes the significator to the central section of the wheel and ascertain whether the number represented by the remainder from this division appears in the upper and lower part of the wheel. If in the upper, the question is answered in the affirmative; if in the lower, in the negative. For example, suppose you desire to know if it is fortunate to take a trip upon a certain day. Your name is Henry. Turn in the Pythagorean wheel, find H equivalent to 3. E to 25, N to 25, R to 14, and Y to 19. The sum of these letters is 76. You desire to start your journey upon a Saturday, which from the table of Pythagorean numerical correspondences is equivalent to 24. On that particular Saturday, you also discover an almanac that the moon is in the 15th day. You then add the latter two numbers to the 76 first obtained, which gives the total of 115. After dividing this number by 30, there is a remainder of 25. Referring to the Pythagorean wheel, we find the number 25 in the right-hand column below the meridian line. The answer is here, therefore, in the negative, advising against the journey and warning that it will not be profitable. When the question is concerned with an indefinite matter for which the day of the week and the moon cannot be calculated, then use the significant name, that of the person involved, and the day of the week and the moon upon which the question is asked. Flood also published what he terms the sphere of Plato and Apelles, the use of which is identical with that of Pythagoras, with one exception. After calculating the numerical value of the given name, find how many times 30 is contained in the sum, and to the remainder add the number of the day and that of the moon. The sum thus obtained is to be once more divided by 30, the remainder thus obtained becoming the significant number. If it appears above the center in the inner panel of numbers on the wheel, the question is answered in the affirmative; if below, in the negative. A careful examination of these Pythagorean wheels shows that the order and arrangement of the numbers has been changed at various times. To say the least, there are minor differences in nearly every edition of the work. During the so-called Dark Ages, the medical arts were closely identified with magic and most forms of healing, with the exception of bleeding and purging, smack of sorcery. This wheel is frequently found in a certain class of medical books, where its application is thus described: after determining the day of the week and of the moon on which the patient fell sick, and also the numerical value of both his Christian and surname, according to the numbers and letters on the outside circle of the wheel, add these together, divide by 30, and consider the remainder as before. If the sum remaining is in the upper part of the wheel, the patient will recover. If in the lower, he will die. We can detect only an occasional mathematical sequence in the number on the wheel, which seem to be placed in a more or less arbitrary manner, a circumstance which leads us to suspect that the true order has been lost. It is in no way unreasonable that Pythagoras himself has discovered the relationship between number and incident, a relationship which most certainly exists in nature. That the wheel must have some merit is evidence from the persistency of its survival and the faith reposed in it by the learned of other ages. It is at least a curious relic of the now virtually lost art of numbers. And we'll begin to... I'm not sure if that's a chapter or... I don't know. The Seven Lotus Blossoms of the Soul, a native Hindu drawing of the spinal chakras according to the Tantric doctrines. I guess. And all the writing was in Hindu or Sanskrit, and I don't read that. Until next time.